nothing you hear, and only one half that you see.
This happened when I was 24. It was a truly frightening experience. I'm a female, and back in those days, I was working in an office. I was living alone in an apartment block. All I used to do was go to work and then go home. Life moved in a monotonous circle. One day, as I was passing by the front of the local train station, a man called out to me. He was wearing a suit, a real ladies' man. It broke up the routine of my mundane life. It was refreshing to be hit on. Since I had nothing better to do that day, I decided to accept his invitation to go out for a drink. But I reminded him that it would be just a drink and nothing more. He was a little older than me. I'd say about 3 years or so. We got on like a house on fire. So after a few dates, he offered me a relationship, and we became a couple. He was very witty and really fun to be around. It was about 2 months into our relationship, and it was the first time I invited him over to spend the night. I bought some alcohol and some snacks since it was Friday, and I was eagerly awaiting his arrival. We set a time for him to come over, and that time had passed. He hadn't texted to say he was running late or anything. Strange. 1 hour passed, then another, and before long it was night. I looked out the window into the night sky, wondering what had happened. An abrupt knocking came at the door. It was loud enough to make me jump. I wondered if this could be a courier or something at the door. I remembered that I hadn't ordered anything though. Rarely people come to the door without being buzzed into the building. It was weird. I guessed it must be my extremely late boyfriend, so I headed to the door.
Can I come in?
It was his voice, but something told me not to open the door. How did he get to my door without being buzzed in? I really can't say why, but I really didn't want to open that door.
Can I come in? Can I come in?
He asked the same question despite the fact that I didn't respond.
Can I come in? Can I come in? Can I come in? Can I come in? Can I come in?
I didn't reply to him, yet he continued to ask to come in. It was his voice, but it sounded like it was a recording of his voice, and it sounded like it was being played repeatedly. I hated it. I covered my ears. It was so creepy. I couldn't tell you how long it went on for. All I remember is when the voice finally stopped. I didn't know what to think. I was in a panic, so I called my boyfriend again and again, but he wouldn't answer. He never returned my calls, and I never saw or heard from him again. I didn't know his address. I couldn't contact him in any way. I didn't know where he worked or anything about his family. I realized I knew barely a thing about the man, and that freaked me out a bit. I often wonder about what happened to him and where he is today. I sometimes wonder if he was even human. It feels like it was just a glitch in the Matrix sometimes. One thing for certain is, I'm really glad I listened to my gut and didn't let him in to my apartment. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I call it the mimic. When I was 17 for almost a year, almost every time my mum and sister were out of town for the day shopping, and I was home alone, I'd hear it. Keys jingling in the front door, the click of the lock, the scrape of the door sliding open and closed as the dogs rushed to the front door, barking to greet whoever just came home. I'd hear my mum or sister tell the dogs to stop and that they live here, and the dogs would stop barking and go about their business. I would get up and go to say hi and go to help put things away, and nobody would be there. It stopped happening once I started staying in bed and calling my mum to see where they were, instead of getting up to greet them. Once, after my mum had surgery, she was staying at her parents' place for a few weeks to heal. I brought my dog for a walk, and when I came home, my mum's dog, who was asleep in her room, started barking. I heard my mum tell her, "Shelby, stop barking." And after a few more barks, she listened and stopped. I ran to my mum's room to say hello. I hadn't seen her in a few weeks at that point and didn't know she was coming home, but her room was empty. I still don't know what it was or why the dogs listened to the disembodied voice. I don't know why it was stealing my family's voices. A lot of other things happened at that apartment, from knocking in the walls to claws scraping down my closet door. In the same apartment, my sister had just left to her boyfriend's and my mum was at work. I started feeling sick one day. I grabbed a banana and went to my room to try and feel better. Almost as soon as I got on the bed, I heard a knocking coming from inside the walls. I could replicate it exactly by knocking my knuckle against the wall. I called my sister crying because I didn't know what it was, and she came home. But just before the front door opened, the knocking stopped. She made sure I was alright and then left again, and everything was quiet. I stood up to go throw away my banana peel, and as I was walking past my closet and out of my bedroom, I heard one final knock in the walls. A few months later, I rearranged my bedroom and set up a little reading corner where I was leaning against my closet in a little blanket nest I made on the floor. It only happened when I was leaning against the door for over 20 minutes. But anytime I would be reading in my little nest, I would hear and feel the vibrations of the door rumbling against my back. What sounded like claws dragging down the inside of the closet door, trying to get out. It only happened 3 times before I rearranged my room again. This time, I put my bed against the closet door so anything in there couldn't get out. Mind you, my closet was completely full to the top. A kitten couldn't fit in there. So I don't know where the sound was coming from, but it certainly wasn't in the 3 garbage bags pressing against the door. I still heard things coming from my closet after moving my bed against it, but I felt safer knowing it couldn't get out. I still don't know what was in that apartment, but I'm glad it didn't follow me when I left. I am a security guard, and this happened about half a year ago. Something or someone turned up during my shift, and I can't really explain it. Like I said, I'm a security guard. I don't work supermarkets, factories, or events. I patrol a number of contracted properties, so more often than not, I am patrolling a school, elementary schools and high schools mainly. The shift usually starts at either 9 or 10 p.m, because occasionally some of the students have events or teachers working late. Things like that. It's never great if staff are on site. Well, I don't think so. I prefer the solitude. You might imagine that I'm walking around the school grounds as my patrol, but my company doesn't ask that of me. I'm not sure what other companies are like. My job is patrolling inside the school. This would involve going around and making sure all the valuables like the computers and gym equipment are all locked away and no windows or any other access points are left open. I would usually go outside at some point, but most of the night is indoors, which isn't too bad on a rainy night. One bad thing about school buildings is that they are often long and shaped like a capital letter H. It takes a little bit of time to do a full lap of them. Anyway, now that I've set up the scene somewhat, let's get back to the story. This someone or something that turned up on my shift wasn't following me around. It was outside of the school grounds. In short, it was going along behind the fences and walls around the school. At first, I thought that it was for sure a human's footsteps I was hearing. But then things got strange. The school's fences and walls are all uneven. It was a weird school. They even had stairs on the outside of the buildings. It would take about an hour to go around the school from outside the walls. So when I went outside, I heard these footsteps following me. Every step I took was mirrored by this unseen person or thing. There were times when they should have gone faster or slower since they were behind the wall. But they didn't. They just copied me. I mean, these footsteps weren't causing me harm, but they were kind of freaking me out. I can't really complain or do anything about it because whatever was beyond those walls and fences didn't show much interest in coming in here. Besides, if there is someone out there at night copying my movements, do I really want to tick them off? I would rather at least be able to hear where they are rather than not. It happens a lot recently, every time I work at that school to be honest, and I've begun to understand that there is a kind of pattern to those movements that only seem to come when I am on shift. I've asked the other employees at my company, and they haven't heard any footsteps. The footsteps can only be heard from 11 PM onwards, when the school's outer lights go off. These floodlights are set on a timer, and they shut off at exactly 11 PM. The footsteps never come on nights when it rains. I've shone my light at the fence where I heard the footsteps a couple of times, and when I do that, I hear a huge thud crash against the fence. And then the footsteps just resume mimicking me. Like I said, I can't do much about a person outside of the school grounds walking around. As long as they stay out, it's not my problem. My worry is that one day something's going to happen. The school faces the woods on most sides, so there are many places for the owner of those footsteps to come from and run to. I get freaked out when the school gate is open and I have to go and close it. I wonder if something is going to come out of the dark charging towards me and what it might look like. I think it's human though, which makes this much more unpleasant. I wish I had an ending for you, but I don't. It just ends with me hoping the footsteps will stop one day, or at least continue to stay away from the school. This story happened at one of my more recent job places. Sit tight, this one still gives me the chills. I worked at a boarding facility for dogs and cats. From day one, stuff was off. The first thing I noticed, weird, was hearing a voice right behind me, and when I turned around, seeing no one there. Understandable enough, with 20 to 70 dogs barking all around me for their lunch or playtime or potty breaks. I kept disregarding these things until one day, from the top of a low kennel, a partially filled water container like the ones you use to water plants with and we used to fill water bowls, flew at me. No way a dog could have hit it and sent it somehow flying horizontally at me. It missed me by an inch or so. I felt the breeze of it flying past me as I walked by, and it hit the kennel across from where I was located, hard. I knew something was up there, but still hadn't paid it much mind. Shortly after, I noticed the metal doggy doors that led from each kennel to an outside run would start swinging when I entered the kennel to clean, or for anything really. I would look at the doggy doors on both other sides. No motion from them. If I stepped out of the kennel, the door would stop swinging. One day, a coworker got mad at me and called me. She said she saw me through the window and asked why I didn't go back and talk with her for a bit. I answered with the fact that I wasn't, nor had I been anywhere near work that day. She thought I was kidding, went to the front desk to ask, and was told that no one, in fact, had been through at all in the past couple of hours. This happened 3 times with different coworkers, where they all would see me from another room or yard and ask why I never stopped to talk on days I wasn't at work. This eventually progressed. I was moved up to being the bather for our location, so a lot of dog baths and loud dries going for the pups. And I kept seeing every time I was bathing a dog, my manager and then friend, and also the person whose voice I heard the most when no one was near me, standing by my side. She would stand there waiting for me to turn around and turn off the dryer so I could hear her. And once I did and turned towards her, no one was there. She would be busy with clients, or not even in the building. At this point, some of us girls had already been discussing the weird stuff going on. One friend and I said, roughly at the same time, "Oh, the mimic? Imitator?" We looked at each other and smiled nervously. We had never talked in depth about this stuff because, come on, how many people would even take us seriously? It turns out 2 other girls had heard or seen me or my manager more than once when we weren't there, or it wasn't us. 2 more things stuck in my memory about this place. 1, we had a storm which led to power flickering on and off. From reception to the back kennel area, where most of the activity seemed to happen, was visible through a large window so clients could see where their fur babies would be kept. As the lights flickered, 3 of us stood in reception, past our shift in case we had an emergency. 2 of us were facing that window. Both of us, at the same time, saw a fast, non-identifiable shadow thing rush past the window, even higher than the top of the kennel doors, which, by the way, are 6 feet tall. We saw this twice during the light flickers. The second thing that struck was this. We had radios. We just often forgot to use them or even turn them on. One of my co-workers was outside with the daycare dogs. Dogs there just to play for the day. When her radio clicked, a voice she did not recognize said, "Spot's mum is here for pickup," and cut out. She went to answer, only to realize her radio wasn't on. She got that dog ready and took him to the front, where the receptionist said she didn't call for him. She didn't have any radios on either. We still don't know what it is or was we experienced, but we do know it was out of the ordinary. When I was in the first year of high school, I used to love going fishing. I was really into mountain stream fishing. I would always try to catch iwana. It's a kind of rockfish out here in Japan. This type of fish is very sensitive. If it gets the slightest indication that there are humans around, it will dart off. This means that fishing for this rockfish must strictly be a solo venture. If I saw another angler nearby, I would always find another body of water to fish in. I was serious about my hobby. The fishing spots I used were about 20 minutes off the normal footpath in the woods. Well, more like the mountainous woods. So after school on the day before I intended to fish, I would always head up there. I would wrap thread around the trees, over bushes, across boulders, any place anyone could gain entrance to the streams. I would do this to know where the quiet fishing spots were. The thread was incredibly thin, barely visible, and it would always break on impact. I was certain that no one would get hurt. So the next day I rode my bike into the woods. I went around checking all the thread I had set up and smiled when I found an area which didn't have a break in the thread. I broke the thread myself and squeezed and ducked my way through all the forest obstacles and headed down to the stream. I started fishing almost immediately. There was a problem though. I could hear voices upstream. Someone was making a hell of a noise up there. Seemed weird because of the effort I had to go to get down here. We were deep in the forest. The trees were thicker and there were boulders everywhere. It didn't seem like a place people would come to play. The thread wasn't broken either. They must have been crazy to be playing out there. They were getting to me. I really wanted peace and quiet to catch this goddamn rockfish. They were ruining it. At points, it sounded like their laughter and screams were all around me. After a while, it sounded like their voices were headed further away, and I thought that I might still get a chance to do some fishing. I wanted to get on with it. The sun was beginning to set. Just as soon as I resumed, a bunch of dead leaves started flowing down the stream, enough to literally cover the whole surface, rendering fishing impossible. "What are you doing, you idiots?" I thought. I was really angry. They scared away any fish that might have come back. I felt for certain that these people were messing with me and laughing at me. I couldn't see them though. I suspected it was a bunch of guys, so I held off shouting what I was thinking. Who knows how many of them could have been out here? It's never a good idea to tick off a bunch of unseen people in the woods either, right? But to satisfy my own curiosity and find out what these people looked like and what the hell they were doing, I decided to creep up the river towards where I heard all the noise. At points, it sounded like my friends from school, and I couldn't believe that they would be out here doing this to me. Well, maybe as a prank, I suppose. I can't be sure, but I thought I heard my name at one point too. I climbed up a very narrow rocky path littered with trees and bushes alongside the stream. The trees totally surrounded me on either side. I felt like I was on a jungle expedition, like in the movies or something. As I grew closer, amidst the sounds of the voices, which still sounded like my friends, was a lone, strong female voice. Then the male voices faded away, like they weren't even there in the first place. Like it had changed. It was strange to think of a woman now, alone in here. To get to wherever she was, you would probably have to walk in the river at points. I could do this easily as I was wearing my fishing gear. Stranger still, why did she come all the way out to the woods just to act so creepily? When I thought about it, all the noises suddenly stopped. To be suddenly plunged into silence after all that was very jolting. I was getting scared now. I said to myself, enough, let's get out of here. I turned around and started moving quickly back the way I came. I started to hear something splashing behind me. I quickly realized that it was heading right towards me. I was terrified. I broke into a full-on sprint, weaving in and out of the trees and boulders. I got back to my fishing gear and ran straight past it, almost tripping on my tackle box. I ran back to the main path where I had set up the thread. As soon as I had a path out of there, I looked back despite my fear. I wanted to see what had been chasing me. I saw a horrible, dark shadow between the trees, hunched and facing my direction. I swear, it was looking at me, but I couldn't make out where its eyes were. I froze in my tracks. I was so frightened, I just couldn't move. It then moved its elongated body back down towards the stream. I never set foot in those woods again. I didn't even go back for my fishing equipment. It was a real shame to lose it all, especially since I was young, but I just couldn't face going back there. I literally have no clue what that thing was. I'm all ears to any suggestions. Was it a ghost? Maybe some kind of cryptid? How did it mimic all those voices? I think about it all the time. It's the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. This happened when I started living alone. Not long after I just moved in, I think it must have been the first week, I found out that my new apartment was in the path of an oncoming typhoon. That night I had gotten off to sleep alright, but I awoke in the middle of the night to hear the sound of the wind and rain lashing my windows. It was so loud, I just couldn't get back to sleep. I was lying there in bed, thinking about nothing in particular when I heard. It was coming from the front door. It was the doorbell. Who the hell would be ringing the doorbell of my new apartment? I asked myself. I crept downstairs and took a look through the peephole. There was a person out there. I was freaked out, but I asked, "Who is it?" I heard the fear in my voice.
Hey, it's me, man.
It was my friend, literally my best friend. He was one of the only ones who knew my address. "Why didn't you just tell me you were coming, man? It's like the middle of the night," I said through the door. I tried to get a look at him, but it was dark, and he had his hat pulled down. That didn't matter since we were friends. I mean, it was a little weird, but I have known him for years. "Hey, you did really well to get here in this storm, dude," I called out as I started to unlock the door. That was the moment that something dawned on me. Best friend or not, why is he out here, barely talking, and how did he make it here? I could still hear the ferocity of the typhoon against the front door. Another odd thing, he didn't have a driver's license. Even if he somehow caught a bus, he would have had to walk for a long while. I didn't know the area all that well, but it seemed a bit too late for buses. Besides, who turns up in the middle of the night during a typhoon, unannounced? These all were red flags, and I didn't like it. What the hell was this? I brought my eye closer to the peephole. "Hey, bud, how did you get here?" I asked cautiously. We fell into an awkward silence while the typhoon raged on. I brought my eye closer to the peephole. I wanted to catch a closer look at him. His skin was disturbingly pale. It reminded me of a waxwork skin. His eyes flitted back and forth, as if they were remote-controlled. That wasn't my friend. I wasn't even sure that was a human. It was pretending, whatever it was. I didn't let on that I was scared, but I was petrified. I watched that thing out there, which looked like my best friend, stand there and smile inanely, occasionally twitching at the corners of its lips. I had to get away from the door once I saw that. I went into another room and tried my best to compose myself and tried to think about what to do next. All the while that friend thing repeated the same line it delivered earlier, as if it was all it knew, like an actor practicing lines.
Hey man, it's me. Hey man, it's me. Hey man, it's me.
I called my friend, the one it was impersonating. He said it wasn't him. I knew it wasn't him, but I just had to be 100% sure. That thing was very convincing. I went upstairs and went back to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. I didn't know how long the thing stayed outside my door, but I heard it occasionally, repeating its line.
Hey man, it's me.
After a sleepless night, the sun rose and the typhoon subsided. It took a while for me to get the confidence to approach the peephole, but when I did, I found that it was gone.
Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. As always, a big thank you to all of the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. If you want to help support this channel, you will find links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store in the description below, so feel free to have a look. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.